You're all set.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sam Reitz, and I wear a lot of different hats, but writer and founder of Millennial Ethics are some of my favorites. Welcome to the Girl Power Film and Media Summit. This is its 4th year running, and we've adapted to the digital space. This is the panel on directing for television, and joining me are 3 accomplished female directors. I like to say directors because we don't need qualifiers anymore. And I'd like to tell you a little bit more about their work and their vision. So to kick things off, bear with me as I open it up. To kick things off, Sam Bailey is a writer and director from Chicago, currently residing in Los Angeles. She is the creator of the Gotham-nominated web series You're So Talented and co-creator of the Emmy-nominated web series Brown Girls. Sam is currently developing the film Sabrina with Braun Studios and is a producer on Netflix's Dear White People. She directed Paul Feig's Powder Keg digital series East of La Brea and has directed episodes of television including Grownish, Mixedish, The Chi, Dear White People. She's a digital art director of VAM Studios and was included in the Roots 100 Most Influential African Americans of 2018, Forbes 30 Under 30 Class of 2018, and New Cities Film 50 list. Thanks, Sam.
Thanks.
Claire Scanlon started her career editing documentaries for PBS and Discovery. That didn't last because The Office called and she won her first Emmy for editing. Then they gave her the chance to direct. She killed it. Other comedies called like Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, The Mindy Project, Modern Family, Fresh Off the Boat, Blackish, The Good Place, Purgatory, Speechless, and Son of Zorn. Then Netflix called about Glow, and her first feature film, Set It Up, which is about 2 overworked and underpaid assistants who work for people who treat them like dirt. Sounds like they're in advertising. She jumped into commercials with campaigns for Jack Daniels NBA partnership for Arnold Worldwide. But all you really need to know is that she grew up in Chicago, likes pizza, and she's really funny. Thank you, Claire. Excited to hear your insights. Yeah, you both are from Chicago. It's amazing. And then last but not least, Sheree is a trained actress at Lambda and then changed direction to study government at the London School of Economics. On graduating, she won a place at the BBC's prestigious general trainee scheme. She directed documentaries for a few years before switching to drama. She was nominated for a BAFTA for The Trials of Oz, starring Hugh Grant for BBC, won Best Director Award from the Directors Guild of Great Britain for Burn It, won a Royal Television Society Award for The Young Person's Guide to Becoming a Rock Star, her 2-part series Casanova for Masterpiece in BBC, starring Peter O'Toole, David Tennant, and Rose Byrne, won numerous awards, and her My Family and Other Animals was nominated for an Emmy. She directed the feature film The Decoy Bride, starring Kelly MacDonald and David Tennant, and the 90-minute BBC film The Scandalous Lady W, starring Natalie Dormer. She's recently finished filming Sex Life for Netflix. She's directed many outstanding TV dramas, including American Horror Story, Ugly Betty, Unreal, and the very popular Bridgerton. We're really, really excited to have you all here and to hear your insights. Thank you for showing up, and we're really excited to hear what you have to say. So to kick things off, the general format of this conversation will take place in 3 parts. I'd love to hear your insights on the creative, the technical, and the practical, and then we'll open it up to the audience and hear from some of them as to what's the most pressing questions. So I know you all you started your careers from very different perspectives: acting, writing, and similarly editing. And so that kind of diversity of thought, I'm curious, how did those beginnings impact your journey to the director's chair? Very excited to kind of hear how there's such different processes. How did that inform your trajectory? Sam, you want to start us off?
Yeah. I thank you for having me, by the way. It's so cool to be on a panel with a bunch of dope female directors. I actually don't mind the qualifier. I'm very much that. So the beginning of my career was, I was actually a trained actor in Chicago, and I was very much focused on the stage and wanting to be like kind of playing that arena, and then was kind of told that there weren't just that many roles for Black women, young Black women at that time. So I started writing my own roles, and I did that with You're So Talented, and I was writing and directing and producing that. And then Brown Girls, I took a step behind the camera And just solely directing and solely producing was really eye-opening for me because I hadn't done that and played in that world. And really it was the press around brown girls that got us in, it kind of got us into Hollywood in that way. And so my background in acting put me in a position to want to write and direct, kind of being upset with that, that place. And then it put me in a really great position to be able to take what I do in the indie world and then move that into the TV space.
Claire, would you like to weigh in?
Because I feel like Sam's only going to know this person. Bill Curtis was the person who gave me my first job. He was a newscaster in Chicago, and I was working at the New Explorers transcribing for him while I was at University of Chicago, which had no film department. So I had no background in film whatsoever. Just I loved it. I loved watching it, and I loved stories. I loved reading. And when I came out to Los Angeles to go to graduate school for film theory, all my peers went on to get their PhDs, and I said, academia is not for me. My TA said, I don't want to be an assistant editor. Does anyone want this gig I have? And I said, I want a job out of grad school. I have so many student loans to pay. And I was lucky enough to work with Arnold Glassman, who was an amazing editor, kind of the go-to editor / director on films on film. So for instance, he directed and edited Visions of Light, which is a lovely documentary on cinematography. I worked with him, and it's amazing that this is one of the first jobs I ever had here in Los Angeles, was Frank Capra's American Dream, the quintessential like rags to riches story. And after that, I worked on a lot of schlock, including The Apprentice, I'm embarrassed to say, but I needed to pay the rent. And so I had a lot of opportunities to work in post on lots of different, reality TV was just percolating, and documentary was not what it is today. I'm so pleased to see how the trajectory of docs has evolved. And I kept gravitating unintentionally to documentaries on comedy performers. For instance, Carol Burnett, A Woman of Character for PBS, Bob Newhart, Unbuttoned. And even though I didn't realize like that was a passion of mine, it just kind of kept happening over and over. I'm like, I have to realize this pattern. And when I was up for the job on The Office, it was my first narrative editing experience. And it was great because it was filmed as a pseudo documentary. So it played into my strengths. And from that, Greg Daniels was amazing and had such respect for editing, because it really was a version of writing for him. It was kind of taking that, like a sculptor works against, you get away the words, you kind of pare it down as negative versus positive space, and hone it. And then as a result of his respect for post, he'd already had two other of the editors, Dean Holland and Dave Rogers, direct. And so it was not such a huge leap or big ask for me. It was a great give for him, given that I hadn't been there from the start like those two editors. But I did get the opportunity to direct an Office episode in season 8 and one in season 9. And then Mindy Kaling also gave me an opportunity on the Mindy Project, which was a huge break for me, given the aesthetics of that show is so different than a mockumentary. And once I kind of proved that I could handle a more seamless style of shooting, then more job offers came. I was really lucky for all of those people. Greg Daniels was a huge, Paul Lieberstein, huge proponents in pushing me forward, as was Mindy.
Sheree, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well.
Yes, well, it's quite interesting. I'm a little bit older than the others. And when I grew up watching old movies on the TV, that's how, at home, that was my passion when I was a kid. And coming from a very ordinary background. And I realized subsequently that, I'd be watching all these old movies and it would say directed by Frank Capra, Alfred Hitchcock, Howard Hughes, William Wyler, whatever, all these people who I have revered, but they were all men. And there was it never said directed by a woman. But a lot of the movies I saw had Betty Davis, these really powerful, Katharine Hepburn, these really powerful women in the leads. And I could act, so I went to drama school, I became an actress. Luckily, it didn't do very well for me. And then I completely thought, oh well, I'll have to leave this. It didn't even occur to me. Still, I was in theatre, but it still didn't occur to me to be a director. And it was only going through a whole education process, coming into the BBC, where I used to make documentaries, but that was when that was before things like The Apprentice. So we were making very clever documentaries, and it was very creative, very, very creative, very interesting, great training, and then I thought, I want to do drama, and I just sort of pushed my way and then sort of worked my way towards drama. And of course, once I did, the skills I'd learned from doing the documentaries, which you could use the storytelling together with the natural instinct with actors, all came together. But it was a bit circuitous to get there. And I really do believe, I do think things are now better for women in what we do, because they now have female examples, and it's less rare every year, so.
No, it's absolutely true. I mean, if we can see it, we can be it. And I think, having that visual is something to aspire and inspire. So a little bit kind of related to inspiration, were there female directors or women directors whose work you were inspired by, that kind of influenced your present day initiatives or your present day work? Are there people that you've collaborated with that have helped to really drive your vision forward for specific projects, women in particular? Agnes Varda is somebody who comes top of mind in the film space. I'm curious, were there said female figures that you did know of or look to? And what kind of impact did they have on your craft and your process?
I didn't have... Similarly, I kind of went around directing before I realized that the thing that I wanted to do was the thing that the guy was doing to me, you know what I'm saying, the entire time. And I also didn't realize, you guys have to understand, it wasn't really until Ava DuVernay and social media came together that I was like, oh, Black women direct? I had no idea. And we're still a very small amount in the union, but that was before I started filmmaking. I didn't know of other ones who were there. I didn't know that Gina had directed Love and Basketball. I didn't know that the person who directed Eve's Bayou was a woman, a Black woman at that. These were just movies that existed, and they're so few and far between. I didn't know who was telling the story, but I could tell there was a difference. Once I started writing and once I started doing more of my indie work, I came across Kathleen Collins, who was one of the first Black female directors to have a movie distributed, but they wouldn't distribute it in the States because they told her they didn't understand. They didn't think that Black people existed like that. And that was the movie Losing Ground. And I found all these interviews on her, and I felt so cheated that she existed. There's this rebellious, loud, really central Black female director who existed and was kind of shunned from the industry. So I didn't know about her until her book came out. And that was right before I got to Hollywood. And it was really good for me because it made me feel less alone navigating the space.
So that kind of brings me to the idea of we have some questions that are filtering in. So I will take the latest. It says, have you seen folks come into the industry later in life? I just turned 34. I studied film in undergrad and PA'd out of college, but then left the industry 10 years ago and have been out of the industry. So a question about, is it ever too late to get started? I would argue no, but I'd love to hear your insights.
But let's not pretend it's easy, how, it's all just for me, it was one moment of luck. I got into the BBC, and it changed my life forever. And I knew when that happened, and of course it's not too late, and especially I think now, because also anyone can make a movie on their phone. So you can it's easy to make a product to show people, which I would think if you're trying to break in is what you might need to do.
I also think that you can't hold directors or people that work in production on such a pedestal. And I think, remember James Cameron was a truck driver. I mean, a lot of people haven't gone to university. I mean, it's not untouchable. I do think there's this sense there's this, that's the highest there is on the hierarchy of production. it's not necessarily true. And to think that a director's the end all be all is, I think, something that needs a mystique that needs to be pulled back, so that it's, when you were asking the question about women and influence, directors that influenced me as a woman, I was like, I was trying to remember, like, who is the director that I was like, oh, that looks like something I would want to do. And it wasn't a woman, it was Spike Lee, and he was like going to work and he looked like wearing regular clothes. He wasn't wearing a suit. He certainly wasn't wearing jodhpurs, like he made it look accessible and like something someone could do, and it didn't seem in such rarefied air. So I think it's also like the mystique that they try to imprint upon the industry overall, that kind of makes it an us versus them kind of thing. And I think if you stay on a clear course for yourself, then you will find the opportunity. If you're tenacious and you want to tell stories and you don't succumb to peer pressure and tell your story, embrace your uniqueness, I think that's what makes you special and will make you succeed.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. In terms of process and kind of relative impact of COVID-19, I'm curious kind of to what extent has that impacted the way you prepare for a shoot? I know that there's extensive, really expensive protocols that are required on set now. I'm curious, are there any technical modalities that you've turned to that have really helped to ease the process, make it more accessible? I'm just curious what that shift has formatively looked like.
Well, one thing I would say, I've directed a couple of episodes in the COVID environment, is that actually the Zoom meeting is going to be our friend from now on, because we all realize now you don't have to necessarily go in to do a meeting or whatever, and it might sometimes you can get locked into meetings that go on, and it might speed that up in future if we stick to that model where you don't have, you can be prepping at home and doing a Zoom meeting and save some hours in your day. But to be honest with you, when I shot during COVID, once you get used to the mask and the visor and all that rubbish, it didn't seem that different. I mean, in the end, you just get used to it. Has anyone else done it?
Yeah. I would say this is just so practical, but I used to use paper more. I mean, this is just really practical. And I feel like I disseminate all my schematics and overheads to everyone now. Just everything is digital. Everything's like, I just email everybody. Everyone has everything on their iPads, their phones. I mean, even actors' sides, they were reading them off their phone versus holding sides, just a lot less paper on set. And the hardest thing I found about the masks and the face shield is, for me, it inhibits one of the tools I have to communicate, and directing is a lot of communication. So for an actor to get feedback or response, or even when I'm talking to a DP, it's like it's hampering my ability to communicate, to be heard. It's not like you want to give a subtle note, like, so that everyone can hear, it's, sometimes it would be nice to people to hear one another better, but these are small infractions, to make it a safe workplace. It's worth it.
Yeah, same. I also directed during COVID back in like October into November. And it was similar, like it felt kind of the same, aside from the masks and the shields. And I've been using scriptation, so that I didn't have any papers, which is good. If anyone doesn't use scriptation, I find it really helpful on set, because I will put my sides down every place aside from where I need it to be. So it's good for me to have that. But to me, I think it was like morale. It's really hard to have people perform at their best when we're just in sad times, and it's such a complicated place to be at, because people want to work, people need to work, but also people don't feel safe, and people have families, and a crew and a set, you have so many different types of economic backgrounds and different types of families. So I found it to be really, really stressful. And I found it to be that we were all trying to act as if it wasn't stressful, and it was. So as much as I could have a moment with my DP and be like, we're good, we're here, because the way you could make jokes on set and that person's joking is not at all what was going on. It's like there's so much miscommunication, because we couldn't, not only could we not see each other, but taking up space is anxiety building during this time. So for me, it was just like really making that show know that like I see how hard this is, and I appreciate that you guys are still here, you know.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I think, boosting morale and culture on set in general is such an important quality, and it's interesting to see kind of how COVID has reshaped the way in which we approach that entire dynamic. My next question is specific to representation. It seems to be that there's corporate momentum behind DE&I data indexes in scripted programming becoming kind of public access. So early examples of early adopters being Netflix teaming up with UNC's Annenberg Inclusion Initiative, doing a deep dive on their 2018 to 2019 original slate, and then similarly Starz launching a Take the Lead campaign. I'm curious whether or not you each see this as a conversation that will become more kind of mainstream in the future, whether or not this sense of transparency will be an emerging trend in the scripted world, to what extent like art and policy will become more of a mainstream kind of common practice. I'd be curious to see kind of from the director's perspective, to what extent you see this kind of adoption becoming.
In terms of mandates?
Yeah, in terms of,
yeah,
either in terms of mandates or just a sense of whether or not the studios would become more amenable to hearing these conversations take place to begin with.
I mean, if we're hoping that they're just being amenable to hear the conversation, I think our bar is really low, right? Like, I'm hoping that I'm hoping that it's more than just hearing the conversation. I hope that it changes in the hiring practice, and it changes not only like our roles, but who also like, I hope it changes IATSE. I hope it changes like the crew members. The amount of times I've been on set and like the one other female person in the crew pulls me to the side to say that I'm either the first woman that they've directed that have ever, and they've been in the union for like 20 years, or definitely the first Black woman ever. This has happened last year. This happened like 2 years ago. So this is, wow. Even though I know things are moving, I also know that like they can't be moving enough if people that have been here and who are like tried and true crew members are still like surprised at my existence in this space. So I don't really know how they're going to do it. Hollywood's not really a place that values transparency. So I don't really know what that's going to be. Or yeah.
That I love the television show Insecure, and Issa Rae created it, and we share a manager, and every time I'm like, I want to direct one, and he's like, no, you're never going to get to. And I love that, because she's only hiring African American women. Like, and I think it's not just, look, and she has the power for her show to do that. I think that's one microcosm of a story that kind of has to just happen in every which way. So, I can't speak, Mindy is doing a show called Sex Lives of College Girls, I think. It's all women directing practically. And Kabir is also directing, but it's, for the most part, it's across the board just women directors. And I think I wish I could say that corporations are going to do this. And I know they're doing the studies and they have the mandates. When I go and see who the other prepping directors are, when I cross paths with people, I am seeing a couple more women. I think that's great, but I do feel like it's got to come from, I hate to say that, the people that are hiring, the show creators have to like make it an agenda and just be like, and then kind of put the studio in an uncomfortable position if they're like, but what about, sorry, no. I feel like that's in the television world. In the feature world, I think it's much more difficult. And I mean, I think just getting a feature made today is just very difficult inherently. But I think things like what Ava DuVernay's created with a bunch of people called Array is great for below the line as well as above the line. And, it's so great when someone's like, oh, I couldn't find a gaffer. Well, right there, go to that right there, it's like just also getting people out of their grooves and their knee jerk. Like, I like to work with the people I've always worked with and say, well, okay, but that's not an option on this show. So you have to work with new people. So do you want to work on this show? Because it's a pretty cool show. I think there's got to be a level of discomfort.
Mhm.
Yeah, I just agree with everyone. I mean, you know, it's just crazy, you know. It's beyond belief to me, you know. The female, we are 50% of the population. You know, I mean, the idea that as a woman, I'm even called a minority, I find offensive, to be honest with you. I don't understand, you know, I don't understand what that even means. How can I be a minority if I'm 50% of the population? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And I think the old idea, I mean, you know, I've been around long enough that I could really see there is change happening. And you know, we've just got stuck. There was this old idea of the director being like this general that walked on the set with his big cigar and, you know, like, sort of thing. I mean, they know it's over and it's changing. Look at the DGA Awards, look at the Golden Globes. I can see it. It's changing. And of course, people are frightened of, you know, things, but now they've actually worked out, oh, do you know what? Maybe women can direct. I do think it'll get better because they realize that women can. For some reason, there's something in their head that said that women couldn't direct, right? I don't know.
Women are amazing multitaskers.
Exactly.
Better than men at directing in that respect.
So it kind of brings me to the question of whether or not when you have, as a director, control over the culture that you create on set, what are some of like the value propositions that you'd like to make, that you try to maintain, or in not only the hiring process, but also just like you were saying, Sam, in boosting morale and just creating that feeling of coalition building. You're working with really fast slates in TV, so I'm just curious how you maintain that ethos and maybe challenge some of those age-old paradigms that are existing.
Well, I don't walk around with a cigar and a fedora.
Big mistake.
I should try that out though. I mean, it's not, TV is a different game than indie world. Like I don't have my hand in the crew. I don't have my hand in the producers, you know, so it's not so much that I can change the environment. I have to like survive in the environment and try to make it more, as much as possible, bend towards the way I feel comfortable working, which, you know, it's not, I've had to put out fights on sets that are in between other crew members and like, or towards me. It's a lot of times it's, I mean, I find TV sets to be hyper masculine, and that's not really the way that and hyper aggressive, I should say. So that's not really the way that I work. For me, it's been like showing that I can still be intimate and personable with everyone, and whether that's like the set PA up to the EP. I don't really care about the EPs, but like I do care about my like crew, and I care that they know that I'm there for them, and I know that sometimes that that I see what the EPs don't see when they're trying to like make the day and push the day, and they're like, oh, but can we get this other coverage? Like I see that, and I just for me, it's more letting them know that I have their back on that, while making my day, and that makes them happy, and that makes them happy. So like that's pretty much the way I can anchor in.
I think what Sam was saying, TV is such a different beast, and TV showrunner is king or queen. And in the feature world, the director truly is where the buck stops. And on Set It Up, I did have an interesting experience in the casting world where this was 2017. And I'd done some research on other movies that were for the same age group and the same rom-com idea in New York City. And the background casting was just all, I was like, what neighborhood in New York is this? Because it was all young white people. And I was like, first of all, New York, it's all generations. You just walk on the street, you see every age group, and you certainly don't just see all white people in Manhattan. You know, it's very diverse. And my first directive was, I want New York to look like New York. You know, I want unusual looking people, I want heavyset people, I want old people, young people, every ethnicity that you would find in New York City, you know, and just imprinting that on the central casting was helpful. And that also carried through to casting. The casting director and I would put out like, hey, we want to cast this movie. And we would ask for, I was like, I want it to look like Manhattan. I want it to be like, you're not pulled out of the storytelling because it just doesn't look real. And they said, okay, yes. I said, we definitely want to, hire lots of people with a comedy background, absolutely interested. in anyone non-white, basically. And they said yes. And then we just got a bunch of submissions of white comedians. And I was like, oh, no, we weren't just doing the lip service thing. We want people that aren't just white. And they're like, I had to say it twice for it to get through. I hope I'm not stepping on any toes here in the storytelling, but it's true. It's what happened. So, I mean, I think it's more of like breaking the systems that exist that think, oh, we're just going to do it the way we've always done it. And then you just are like, oh, no, I'm the squeaky wheel here. And we're going to do it the way I want to do it. But again, in television, like Sam said, my job is to make my days, maybe get 5% more than what the showrunner wanted, and keep the crew happy, because I can get dinged by any one of those groups and the cast.
Well, speaking,
Actually, just reminded me. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, you were. I was just gonna ask you.
I was just thinking about the hyper male environment. I just did this show, and of course it's true, and it's always it's mainly the same, that it's mainly men on the set and whatever, you know, or then the females are doing the hair and the makeup, and you know, and it kind of drives me mad, those gender roles. I'd love those to change more too. But there was a scene, and within this scene there was a fight, and I knew that all the guys thought this was the most important thing of the day, and they had this other massive stuff going on. There was this sex party, this really complicated, emotional, big scene, and I knew at the end of my day I would just get this fight, and I was going to do the fight really fast. And they kept saying, oh, it's the day we do the fight, it's the fight day, it's the fight day. And I kept saying, guys, it's not going to be, I promise you, the fight's going to be that much, and the rest of the thing. And then on the day, of course, the actors who hadn't heard this thought, oh, this is our fight day. And then we had this moment with the guys, and and they'd had to wait down all day to do this fight with them, because they didn't know I was going to do it in like an hour when I'd spent, you know, and like the actors, it was like, and I kept saying, you know, and then they wanted to make it be like that. And the whole point was that they weren't supposed to be very good fighters, you know. So I just had to stop it and say, no, listen, the thing is, these guys, they're not fighters, you know. It's this, you know, they're these sort of, there's certain, you know, professional guys. They don't punch people. It's a weird thing that happens, and they're looking at me, you know, and then you know, and then I've got a female showrunner, and she comes in, and they're just sort of standing there like, you know, and it was and actually a few days later, so I can't remember, some woman on the crew came up to me and said, oh God, I loved it when you said that all about, you know, the guys, you know. It's like
no, it's amazing though. I feel, but you know, we need those like little anecdotal moments to really like kind of navigate the adventure that is making content today. So we've got quite a few questions in the chat. I hope we can get to all of them. So the next question is, when you get a new job on a new show, what's the process like, and how do you approach the material?
When I get hired, so this is after like the initial interview, if there was one, I feel like I don't know how it works for y'all, but I normally don't get a script until maybe the Friday before I start prep, if I'm lucky, or at the table read, is when I know what I'm directing. Like, unless you know like what the show is or whatever, but in terms of what the content is, like you don't know it until, or for me, I hadn't really known it until I got there. And then there's like a prep schedule, and you go through, it's like the table read, you meet everyone, I feel like I forget the names of all the meetings, but there's a shit ton of meetings over like a week and a half. I'm very quiet during prep because I'm trying to find out who my allies are. So I'm very much like watching until the tech scout, and I'm loud during the tech scout. But yeah, that's kind of, and then you start shooting. I guess but they take you through it. Like your AD is kind of the person that takes you through and meeting all the heads of departments. And then you're kind of just thrown out there on the first day, really. Depending, that's if like it's a smooth moving show. If it's more complicated than that, there might be other side things that have to happen.
Being a TV director for hire is really a skill set unto itself, in that you have to ingratiate yourself into a crew of at least 100 people who've been doing it before you got there. So you have to get on a set and then say, hi, I know you've got a great system going. I'm going to come in and on a show I've never done before and tell you what to do. So I, like Sam, do the same thing. I am quiet at first. And like, for instance, if I'm at Video Village, just meeting the script supervisor and more importantly, even the DP, whom has to be an ally. You have to very much get on the DP's good side. And of course, like right off the bat, doing mostly comedy, I'm like, cross cover, and they hate me right away. But, I want to make sure that the comedy lives. But at the same time, it's almost like a system designed to make TV directors for hire fail. But what I do try to do is watch a bit of the show. If it's not like the very first season, get as many episodes as I can. So at least I show respect to the show, the showrunner, and the actors who molded these roles together. So I'm not just coming in like gangbusters trying to reinvent a wheel that's not broken.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the truth is, it is a very different job to when you're doing your own movie, or exactly what Claire says and Sam said. You have to fit into something, and but once you've let go, and so you're, in some ways, it's like you're given the responsibility, but you're not really in control in some way, precisely because you're in this system. Whereas when you've picked all the people and it's your baby, it's your baby. So whereas this, but you still have to make it your baby. So as Claire says, it is about just working that through. But once you've worked that through, I think it's very fulfilling because when I first started doing it, it felt like more of a compromise because I used to do all my own stuff more. And then it was like, oh, I'm coming into a show that other people have already been directing on for years or whatever. But actually, it's just the art of directing in itself, if you enjoy it, is such a fulfilling thing. And you're learning all the time. And so I think it just allows you just to focus on a sort of micro level on that art as opposed to the bigger picture in some way. And I think that's quite, in itself is a can be very joyful thing to do. Yeah.
It forces you to pivot quickly, move fast, make friends, learn. I mean, I just did an episode of Never Have I Ever, and I thought I knew everything about doing a kissing scene. And then the showrunner, Lang Fisher, said the best, like she was way into it, way into kissing and how you shoot kissing and the best. And she's like 50-50s, man. That's the best way to do a kiss. You'll get coverage, of course, but watch your favorite kisses. They're all 50-50s. And so then I was like, damn it, I just learned something new. And I thought I knew how to do that.
I also, real quick, I started maybe by like the third episode of TV I did, I started hounding the DP to like take them out for a beer before we started shooting, because there's never time in the prep schedule to actually meet with them. Like if you meet with them on set, they're like, I'm on set, like I'm trying to work, and it just doesn't feel like you can, or for me, and I just refuse to continue to be on set and not be able to have like my cinematographer. So I say 9 times out of 10, they're down to do it. And then we just take a couple hours and we talk about what I'm thinking the show is. Let me know what tea you know that I don't know. And that has helped me so much in navigating the space.
Our next question seems to be related to script writing. So are you seeing more women's stories or scripts with all women leads, especially in midlife? And are they being made for TV? Is that a conversation that's being normalized? Midlife female leads in the television space, like a Grace and Frankie. So not quite midlife, but.
What's the question? Are we seeing more of those scripts?
Are you seeing those scripts at all?
No. I mean, I'm seeing new scripts, but I'm not seeing new scripts about
Not yet. You're not seeing them yet.
I just
write it.
I just did a meeting for an HBO show, which I did not get, called Bridget Everett. It's called Someone Somewhere, and I'm sure it's gonna be great. It's gonna actually be shot outside of the Chicago in like Rockford. And it's completely about a woman. I don't know this person's, they're alluding to Grace and Frankie, that's older person, but
yeah,
this show looks great. It's a woman in her early 40s and having kind of like a crisis of just like where she is in her life, and her sister passed away. And it seems like, I think these stories, just like so many other female stories, are coming out and being more, I think you're going to see more of this space. Like I May Destroy You on HBO also. Like I think HBO actually is a Lovecraft Country, like just weird storytelling plus storytelling for groups that just haven't been given a voice before. I mean, Bridget Everett is not a size 2, cute little thing. She's like a very powerful, funny, great singer talent that is getting like a real shot, and HBO is kind of like considered in the States as the pinnacle of quality television, and she's getting a go at it. So I do think that stuff is coming down the pipeline. I mean, I also feel like with the 400 shows that are out there, there's got to be one of everything for everyone.
So a similar question is whether or not you're seeing accessibility. What is the industry standard these days for directing with accessibility in mind is the question. So I think with regard to the differently abled, to what extent are you seeing kind of an industry-wide approach shift? I guess that kind of ties back into the conversation that we were previously having, but are you seeing those trends?
I mean, I'm not seeing any trends because I feel like we're just talking about it now. We're just the fact that people were forced to stay home. And I was in a writer's room when quarantine happened, initially happened. And now all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, you can work from home. Whereas people, like differently able people, have been asking for that option for a long time. So it's just, I feel like, aside from the people who are living those experiences and writing about those experiences, there's not many people outside of that who are championing those experiences. I think that now the conversation is happening more. And I think, I think people are seeing that there's different ways of existing on sets, and we should open that up to a lot of people. But again, like Hollywood didn't all of a sudden become accessible and diverse and inclusive over the last year. We just didn't.
There's kind of two more related to, I would say, early career. The first being, as someone new to film, I wonder if it's better to prioritize just getting into the industry than to only apply to very specific jobs. And then this second one is somewhat related. What tools do you think you need to have in order to have a sustainable career journey, with a specific mind to networks and resource building? So it's kind of a two-part question.
It's such a tough thing to say how to get to where you are, because everybody's trajectory is different. It's like just the three of us have three completely different ways, and we could all do the same show. We could all be bumping into each other on the exact same show. So I think it's more your skill set and how you get there. I mean, I'm always a big proponent of do. So, while you're a set PA, be making, short films on the side on the weekends, don't just talk about it, actually do it. Again, I can't emphasize enough how important it is for you not to conform to the show, what you think, oh, what's ABC doing? What's NBC? What are the networks wanting? Like, who cares what the networks and the streamers are wanting? What story do you want to tell? That's what makes you special. That's what makes you, hopefully that's what drew you to want to tell stories, because that's all we are. It's a form of storytelling. So what stories excite you? Go to those shows. It's easy to find on IMDb Pro. Lots of different, you can ask anyone for an informational meeting. Frankly, everyone loves to talk about themselves, especially like if it's going through a post super, a writer's assistant on your favorite show. These people, you can find them. And if you're, I know someone who got a job on 30 Rock by walking into the office, the production office. They happen to be in the same building. And they just said, hey, I'm looking, and they became a PA. Like, so that person's now a writer on Mr. Mayor, which is a Tina Fey, Robert Carlock show. So, I mean, everybody's got a different way, and I don't think you have to be as sneaky as that. But I just think you put yourself out there, and eventually something will hit.
I did have a question about reference material and what you all have been using. So I know, Claire, you did The Office, And Sheree, I have a question specific to the musical mashups of Bridgerton. And Sam, I know that I'm just curious to what extent it kind of relates, but when I say referenced material, what I mean by that is how much are you pulling from like music and lived experience, and maybe Claire, with regard to the British office, how much do you pull from external material when you're crafting your intricate visions? Simply because you said don't be very specific in what vision you're crafting, but I'm curious about the sources of inspiration that helped to drive your particular visions home.
Well, The Office was a good example, because the Office was running and gunning. It was guerrilla style cinema verite, and it was intentionally unattractive. I mean, it was supposed to portray these people in a very unflattering light. It was great for production because everything, there was never a cross coverage argument. You know, when I say I argue, and argue's not the right word, have an impassioned conversation with DPs. Their job is to make everyone look beautiful, particularly women, which is how they got probably where they are. At the same time, for me, comedy is about accessibility. And frankly, any storytelling is about, like, can I relate to that person? And if they're impossibly beautiful, you know, if I'm looking at Halle Berry or Angelina Jolie, I don't identify with them. You know, they're not relatable to me. But, you know, I can relate to Pam on The Office. You know, I can relate. That's a relatable character. They didn't put her on a pedestal and make her look impossibly gorgeous, or she wasn't. And, you know, not Jenna Fisher is gorgeous, but like, it was just the camera at work and the lighting certainly did her no favors. And so I think on that, like, I don't think the references I would use for that. I think the references I would use is, you know, in that particular show, Michael Scott got all of his harebrained schemes, half of them from YouTube, which was a newer thing at the time. So, like, you know, hey, you guys are getting married, you have to dance down the aisle to the Chris Brown song, you know, like they were all parodies of already things that were popping up in pop culture. And that's how I would use those as references. But like I said, you know, I would look at other rom-coms or go to other projects to see what other people had done before me, going all the way back to like Bringing Up Baby, His Girl Friday, when I got a genre rom-com, and then say, oh, I love this bit and I love this bit. And then, like, even more recent, like I said, with the casting, like, oh, I don't love that bit quite so much, you know? And I think that's what I used as references.
Sorry, there's like I have to pull it up. I'm on an iPad, so I have to pull it up slowly. But the last question is related to what projects you've learned the most from, and on your journey, and what's that one takeaway that you'd like to leave kind of the next generation of content creators with.
Sorry, what was the first part of the question? What was the first part of the question?
First part of the question is, what project did you learn the most from? What were the lessons that you learned from that project? And what is the takeaway that you'd like to leave the next generation of content creators with those lessons in mind? I know it's a deep one to end with.
Well, I'm going to be really honest here. I find there's definitely I'm still learning, put it this way. And I find that sometimes when I feel frustrated by people who aren't very good at their jobs, who possibly above me or whatever, I find that very difficult to deal with because I feel let down. And I don't think I'm always very good at dealing with that. And I haven't fully learned how to do it yet. And every time I let myself down by getting upset about something, it doesn't do me any good. It does me harm. And so I would say to everyone, you know, if you're a passionate kind of person like I am, you really have to learn to hold things in and be always in control of yourself, and don't give things away. Don't give, you know, that I wish someone had said that to me when I was younger. Just, you know, just try it and always be in control of yourself. Don't ever get to the position where your emotions can take over.
I think realize kind of in the same vein, realizing what I'm also a very passionate person. And I think realizing what I have control over and what I don't have control over is really important. And coming from an indie, if you are independently producing your own work, it is a culture shock to go from that to TV. Because you're controlling everything on your own, and then all of a sudden you're learning like what it's like. There's someone's job to move my chair from Video Village to someone else. You know what I'm saying? Like, so it becomes like a chain. It just is a different mind fuck, really. But I think learning to know what you can control, what you can't control, and also knowing that like if you feel like you're in a box, because I think it's so new to have people like us working in this industry that if you do it well enough a couple times, you can just keep going. Like I can keep getting episodic work as much as I want, as long as you don't, fuck up. But just know what you're doing it for. I think for me, I think I lost a little bit of my way halfway through that and had to come back and be like, for me to be able to do TV directing, I have to dip my toe in indie world every now and then. I can't like do full all one or all the other. And so I think it's just knowing what you can control and also know what you're doing it for.
That's good. Yeah.
I would say, I think especially this past year has proven clearly, again, falling back on storytelling, the shows that you choose to work on, the ideas that you choose to propagate, the messages that you choose, to send out are hugely important. And I think sometimes you can, like what Sam said, you can get kind of caught up in like, oh, they want you to direct this. You're special. They want your vision on this. Then I have to remind myself, well, do I want this? You get kind of caught up in this, like, oh, you're hot right now or what, and they're not, I don't know that anyone's ever termed that to me, but like if you are having a momentum, if you've done something that's crazily popular, like a Bridgerton, I would imagine like, ooh, everyone wants you now. And to remember like, what message am I sending? How am I helping put out better images of women in the world, better images of people of color in the world, better different communities, giving people a voice. I love the canon of film. Like Sheree was saying, like I've watched so many movies growing up, and I love Bette Davis, Joan Crawford, Katharine Hepburn, but I also love, I love HUD, I love Paul Newman, I love Quilliam Luke, I love all these great movies. All these great movies with white guys pretty much dominate the canon. And I'm not knocking the canon, but I'm really ready for some other stories. And I'm, again, not saying to the detriment of telling the stories that have been told or potential new stories to be told. I just want to widen out that space so it encompasses more opportunity for other stories in that same said canon. And I think that so often you can get like worked up, like, oh, this is good, this is the next big thing or whatever it is. And the next big thing might not matter. I take a step back and like, I don't care what the next big thing is. What resonates with me? What makes me feel like I'm actually trying to make the world a better place? Because I do feel like storytelling, and particularly laughter, is a great unifier and a great common denominator. And I'm not looking to be pedantic, but at the same time, if I can get someone to laugh and be vulnerable and watch something in the audience, then I can sneak in something as well. I can sneak in a message. Like, for instance, using Set It Up as an example, Lucy Liu's character is really not fun. She's a mean boss. Well, guess what? Her character was the only Asian American in this field of sports journalism, which is already evil to women. Like, I went back and read these horror stories of how horribly they are treated by athletes. And that correlates. I'm sure Lucy Liu could tell you what it was like being on Ally McBeal, the only Asian American on primetime television in the early 90s. Like, I mean, these are all stories like having empathy, compassion, endearment, making sure that her character doesn't just end on a negative note. There's a positive for her, and that's something that I push for, in everything that I work on. And I think the responsibility isn't just always like, oh, these are the things that are happening. It's on how we choose to tell the stories and how we pick those stories we choose to tell.
I think that's a wonderful note to end on, how storytelling is this change agent and how each of you have kind of driven that point home with the respective stories that you've chosen to tell and elevate. So thank you all for being a part of the conversation. Thank you for sharing your insights with the cohort. We're so honored to have you join us. Thank you to everyone who weighed in with questions. I'm sorry I wasn't able to get to all of them, but it's such a wonderful, the Girl Power Summit is running today and tomorrow, and it's such a wonderful way of celebrating the achievements of women in film and television. We need more of these stories. So thank you. It was my pleasure to be a part of the conversation with all of you.